Wir sind die Roboter bei Speedrundale. Schönen guten Abend und herzlich willkommen bei Speedrundale, eine ganz spezielle Ausgabe heute, bei der ich nicht viel lange Deutsch sprechen werde, because I'm gonna talk in English. I just introduced me to the people, but I'm gonna introduce you. Nice to meet you.
Great to be here.
dwangoAC.
Yes.
The biggest star in the world.
This is the biggest star in the world. I'm just his keeper.
You're dwangoAC. I don't know if some people already had the opportunity to see the work that you've done in the past, but we had the opportunity that you could visit us in our studio. We're just a little speedrun show from Germany, and you, of course, are jetting around the world together with your little buddy here. And what exactly is it you're doing for the people who don't know you?
So I am several things. I am on staff as the ambassador for TASBvideos.org. TASBvideos is a website devoted to tool-assisted speedruns, the process of playing a game perfectly with no problems of human skill, memory, reflexes, luck.
Who needs this?
Well,
nobody.
We do our work for TASBvideos on an emulator. But what I'm doing is showing the game being played on an original Nintendo. So everything that is going to happen today is being done on real hardware. Yeah,
that's the special thing. We, of course, are talking also about the big showcases like AGDQ, SGDQ here on Speedrundale. And we had the opportunity to see runs that you did with TASBot already. And we had a TASBot runner here, or a TAS runner, so to speak, because he didn't have the nice robots here.
So
who's been doing it on an emulator? But you're doing the special thing. That's because you have your original NES hardware here with original cartridges, and you're feeding the stuff to the computer, and then there's a pre-programmed sequence that other people, very capable people, made, so that they can speedrun the game in the fastest and most impossible way. Yeah,
that's a good way of describing it. What you do with a tool-assisted speedrun in an emulator is you have the ability to try over as many times as you like. So if you play through and save a state, we call it a save state, and then play through and hit a Goomba, for instance, or you're not going as fast as you'd like, you can at any moment press a key to go backward in time to that state and try again. We call it doing a re-record or restoring the save state. You might do this tens of thousands of times in the process of iteratively walking your way forward, getting the result you want. And at the end, what you have is, you could call it art, but it's nothing more than a sequence of button presses. The one thing that I'm doing that's different here is I'm playing it back on real hardware, and it's a lot like a player piano. If you've ever seen a music box or a player piano with a piano scroll, it's a piece of paper with holes punched in it, and as the paper goes through a player piano, it plays a sequence of notes to play back a song. What I'm going to be demonstrating here is a sequence of button presses in order that we'll be playing back on the console to play back a game.
Yeah,
from start to finish.
So essentially you have the pre-recorded sequences on the computer here, but you're feeding it through the controller. That's why, I think you have a light-up controller, light-up here. So you see which button is being pressed, actually. And then it's fed through the controller port right into the console. So if somebody were able to replicate exactly these button presses, you could do it just on a normal console like this. The runs that we're going to see here, fortunately you brought enough time with you in some games that we're going to do multiple episodes here. This episode we're going to show some Mario runs on the NES, and these are not runs that you made specifically yourself, but these are runs of other people.
That's correct.
And you converted it, so to speak, so you can run it through your device here.
Yeah. That's correct. The particular run I'm going to start with, as you might be seeing shortly, is Super Mario Bros. 2. This is a warpless run. It was made by Aglar and Andrew G. and submitted to TASBvideos. All content on TASBvideos is released under a Creative Commons Attribution 2.0 license. which means that I'm able to show it here as long as I say where it came from and who made it. The authors spent a lot of time making this particular run. In this particular case, their re-record count, in other words, the number of times that they backed up and tried again, was 26,553 times.
That's a weekend, yeah. Or 500 weekends.
So the interesting thing about a human speedrun is you might grind it out over the course of many weeks of practicing. In the case of a game like Super Mario Bros. 3, which with Mitch Flowerpower, who's a friend of mine, he spent 10,000 hours or some absurd amount. But it shows. It shows.
It shows. Yeah, it shows.
He started figuring out how many hours he had played Super Mario Bros. 3, and he calculated that he had probably played it 10,000 hours. Which is way higher than most people.
I believe him, but you're alluding to, of course, if you want to play it like this, you have to have the constant training. If you're doing it in a task, you can let it rest a bit. You can go later. You can, when you have the mental the mental facilities to just think about it, how this is going to work, and then you can take your time to make such a speedrun.
Right. The difference is this definitely took many, many, many hours to make. But you have all the time in the world to perfect it. And it takes a different set of skills to be a real-time runner than it does to be a speedrunner. In particular, a speedrunner needs very, very good reflexes, twitch reflexes, if you will, hence the name of a particular service. But
never heard of it.
Yeah. If you are doing a tool-assisted speedrun, those tools mean that twitch reflex no longer matters. When you're doing a tool-assisted speedrun, it's almost like using what I would call a chorded keyboard. Say you're trying to run right for great justice. You're playing a Mario game, and your job is to press the run button and the right button. You're going to hold both of those buttons down on a keyboard where you've mapped the keys to the original buttons on an actual controller. And you're going to press another button that says, okay, I'm pressing right, and B, you press one more button to advance a single frame. In NTSC consoles from the United States, they run at 60 frames per second. PAL consoles from Europe use a 50 frames per second equivalent. But a single frame is, at least for this console, 16 milliseconds long, 16.6 milliseconds long. It's a 60th of a second. You're holding down the keys you want for just that one frame and then advancing a frame and seeing if you like the result.
So if you don't like it, you get back. You see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from the test runs I've seen, I think the stuff you're going to show today, maybe I've seen it years ago and I forgot it already, but I'm always very impressed because we're going to discuss it when the run starts because we have time then, because we're not playing this much underneath, but there's some discussions about how are test runs perceived compared to, so to speak, real runs, but that's not kind of the right description because a test run is also a real run. This is just a different kind of category. You wanted to start with Mario 2?
I do.
Let's start with Mario 2.
Run.
And then we're going to discuss the game and a little bit about test running. Yeah?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the reset button. So when I hold this reset button and start sending button presses to the console, when I let go of the reset button,
then the time starts, so to speak.
Yeah, pretty much. So 3, 2, 1, go.
All right.
So this is a warpless run made by Aguilar and Andrew G. It's actually a little bit of an older run. It has not been surpassed. What's interesting about real-time runs is they're often improved over time, and you always have a little bit of wiggle room to make things faster. As you can see, the gameplay you're seeing here is really precise. A human runner would not necessarily be able to move as quickly and as smoothly as you see here. Also, there are some glitches that you can take advantage of, like this one right here, where you shove yourself through the floor.
Of course.
Some runs are what we call RTA viable. In other words, real-time speed viable. A lot of the runs that are done by humans are influenced by tricks discovered through making a tool-assisted speedrun.
Yeah, the good thing with doing such a tool-assisted speedrun is it shows what is capable in the engine. Stuff that wasn't supposed to be done by humans, so to speak, but sometimes there are things that can be found out that can be translated for stuff that people can do. Maybe very capable people, but it also helps influence other mate runs. Yeah?
That's right. While this particular run is all the way from 2011, there are probably only a few frames that could be improved. And in fact, having talked to other members of our community like Maru, there are known improvements to this task, but not many.
So this task would be the baseline for other people trying to do a task?
That's one of the reasons that it's under
Creative Commons.
Right. As long as you provide attribution, you can build on the work of others, which I really like that sampling aspect, and it helps a lot. Now, that was deliberate, as you might have imagined.
Okay.
It looks pretty strange, though. A lot of times you see using damage to take time in ways that would be far too risky for a human to do. I imagine if a human could pull that trick off, they would probably do it. I regret to say that I'm not as familiar with this specific run enough to know for certain if, in fact, that is an RTA viable run or technique. But so there's some other things. We know exactly where the door is going to be. With frame precision, we entered that door the very first opportunity it was possible to do so.
And the very first frame you could do it. Yeah,
exactly.
that's always kind of... It adds up over time, because such small things that can be done perfect in a tool-assisted speedrun, like entering a door or, let's say, catching the ball at Castlevania or something. This is stuff, of course, you can train it as a normal speedrunner, so to speak, but you're losing always a little bit of time here and there. And at the end, it adds up.
What's fascinating about this particular run is Andrew G is well known in the RTA community for having an extremely fast time on the original Super Mario Bros. His time of SMB1 is within a few seconds of the tool-assisted speedrun.
Okay.
He's a very rare crossover that has the patience to do tool-assisted speedruns and the Twitch skills to be a real-time runner. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't a lot of people who do both things. Or that there aren't a lot of people that communicate back and forth between the two communities. Oftentimes, the route that is used in the first attempt at a tool-assisted speedrun was developed by real-time runners. And very often, as the task is made, glitches are found that are then incorporated into real-time runs, and it's a very symbiotic cycle.
Yeah, especially you talked about Mario Bros. 1 or Super Mario Bros. 1. That specifically there are a lot of videos around that it's been analyzed to hell and back, so to speak.
Yeah.
And with all the waiting for the times the buses are coming and these and everything. So there's very specific stuff that can only be found out if it's analyzed, like being made for a task run or really stripped down. And otherwise it wouldn't be possible just to know about these things, how to improve on it. As you said, if the guy who made the run came within very little time to the test run of Super Mario Bros. 1, then it has to be a very, very capable fellow.
Yes, Andrew G is extremely capable. That looks very funny to me. By the way, this particular character runs faster while holding an enemy, so that's why you'll frequently see Toad being used.
Yeah, it's most of the time. Yeah, you have differences in the characters here. I think I used normally back in the day Luigi because he jumped far, or the princess because she could levitate a little bit. But of course it's sensible if you don't need this assistance to use the character who's just the fastest.
In fact, you won't see the princess used at all in this speedrun because she is one of the slowest characters. And here you'll see some enemy tricks there to be able to
avoid them
down.
just in the yeah, all right.
Yep. And all kinds of speed tricks that are just so much fun to watch. That guy drove me crazy when I was a kid. The mask flying around.
Was very scary.
Yes, that was a pretty nifty trick where you can, on the same frame you go through the door, you can pick up the enemy. Which was very time-saving. And then that's just showing off. The run into the mouth, that was timed exactly so that the very first frame you could go through the door was the first frame you...
Yeah, so to get in the very first frame, and now it was quite a fast boss fight here.
Yes.
Essentially one hit, but he got all his hits in with the way he threw the thing there.
Correct. There's some things I want to talk about what you're seeing on the screen. One of the things that is different about this console compared to what I experienced as a kid is it looks really good. And now this is absurd.
This is, why?
Because you can.
It's early Monday here. I'm not quite woke up, so I could be dreaming this, but it feels quite surreal now.
Yes.
You were talking about the quality of the console, of course. This is a real NES, yeah?
Yes, this is a real NES. Now, this is what's called a US top loader. This particular console has a single modification done to it. The raw RGB, red, green, blue color is being extracted from the video board, the PPU. And it's been modified with a connector so that we can get to SCART. And from SCART, I'm going into an OSSC, an open source scan converter, which is possibly visible right here. That particular unit is converting the analog RGB signal over SCART to HDMI, which is then being fed into the rest of the broadcast equipment here in the studio.
How was it? I used back in the day with my console always RGB SCART here in Europe because it was the best possible signal. You could get here very sharp, sometimes a bit too sharp for some of the games. Was it a progressive signal or an interlaced one?
That's what's the most interesting about the original Nintendo and even the Super Nintendo. We call them 240p. One thing you can see is that this says it's
262p.
262p. That's the number of
Never heard of it.
horizontal lines that are being detected. And what this is doing is it's line doubling. As you probably have experienced, old CRT monitors used an interesting technique to be able to fluidly display an image on the screen. They were interlaced. They would show every odd number line, and then they would go back to the top and draw every even number line.
Yeah, it flickers very fast, so you have the impression there's a real, full image.
Exactly, as the phosphor would retain the image. What's fascinating about what Nintendo did is they made it progressive. They did 60 frames per second by making it 240 lines instead of 480. So they halved the number of lines, and in this case it's a little bit weird, it's 262 lines, but there was something called overscan, where the actual area you could see was smaller than the area being drawn, and that was to hide the places on the edges where the CRT gun, it would go too far. And then go to the next line.
Yeah, every CRT television had a different thing, so there was always...
Yeah, and
if you had games, if you had television shows or something, you always had a little bit of overscan that was supposed to be cut off.
Because you didn't want to see the jagged edges. So they would make games with the expectation that you couldn't see all of them. So it's kind of a complicated bit of history, but effectively what Nintendo did is they took an interlaced CRT, but gave it effectively a progressive image, because... They're sending the same lines over and over again. And that means that on an original CRT, you would see some interesting combing-like effects, but the raw console is running at a full 60 frames per second. So by extracting this RGB signal, we're getting all of those progressive frames. This is running at a full 60 frames per second.
So it would have been kind of a fake interlaced mode that's been sent out originally.
Yes.
And now you can benefit from the modern advances, so you can get a really clear signal out of the NES. And yeah, we had already worked with an OSSC here, but I wasn't able to get the signal to work, play nice with the stuff. You thankfully have already more experience with everything here. It's very, very impressive, because we were back in the day either playing with the RF connectors, so to get the console through the channel, or otherwise with composites. And that was the best you could get out of an NES. And to see an original console, of course the newer model, but it's still 25 to 30 years old. To see it, to look as good, and to work with all your stuff you have here.
There's just so much silliness going on in this game.
It's frying my brain.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And that's the fun thing about tool-assisted speedruns, is they're pushing the hardware, the physical console, and the software, the code, the actual game as it was written. I'll say this slightly odd. Sometimes people accuse me of cheating, or I also make tool-assisted speedruns. I have released my own runs and been told I was cheating. Well, no. This is exactly the way the game was coded, whether the original authors knew it or not. Everything they wrote and released is intact. It's just they didn't know it operated this way.
Yeah, when you use it like you use what's there.
Yes,
and that's where you're.
We never modify the game code with something like a Game Genie, for instance. So we're never changing how this works. We don't insert something between the cartridge, which contains the read-only memory of the game, and the console. So the modifications we've done to this console are exclusively quality of life.
Just the video out and stuff like this. Not some Game Genie in there or something.
Yeah, this particular console also has a cable that we've specifically made. This is looks like a headphone jack and a couple of wires. For runs that use it, we can connect this to this specially modified console to reach the reset line.
Okay.
So instead of physically pressing a reset button, TASBot can press the button. And so that allows us to do runs that might do a soft reset for various reasons.
Exactly, yeah. There's some runs where you have to save, do a soft reset, restart the game or something. You have been to quite a bit of the big, I want to say tournaments, but then the tournaments like AGDQ, SGDQ, the big showcases.
Fundraiser, charity
runs, charity runs and everything there. If we're going to do one here, you're of course welcome to come over again.
Well, I did come over for European Speedrunner Assembly, Speedrunning Assembly. That was in Malmö, Sweden.
In Sweden, yeah.
Yes, that was just a few days before the recording of this episode, and we in fact showed Super Mario Bros. 2, but not how you're seeing it here.
Not this version here, but a different version. But
maybe we'll show you that.
We have to see. Now, first, when we finish this up here, it shouldn't take that long anymore, I think.
No, we're coming up. What's our current?
We're about 30 minutes.
This whole run will be complete in less than 5.
Okay, it's a little bit faster than my time because my first speedrun was 5 months. No, I took to finish the game. No, but you were it's like the ESA, like the SGDQ, AGDQ runs there, and there you're presenting different runs with the TASBot. How did you come to the idea to do this way?
It's a really interesting question. So first of all, TASBot is sitting here on the table. He has been my buddy for the last several years. I first started working with this setup more or less in 2013 in preparation for AGDQ 2014. Awesome Games Done Quick 2014. GamesDoneQuick.com. I know I'm chilling a little bit.
That's no problem. We love the work all the people and all the runners are doing over there. And you specifically chose Rob to be the visual representation because you needed something to be the face of TAS speedrunning. Otherwise, it's not really corporeal. No one's pushing buttons, and otherwise people are sitting there and watching. He's doing the work, so to speak. Then.
At that time, things were very different. I was not on staff for TAS videos, and I had seen Games Done Quick events and found them to be very fascinating. I wanted to be there myself, so I had this crazy idea of becoming a speedrunner, and I tried to practice the game Scribblenauts Unlimited. And I discovered very quickly, first of all, it wasn't a good speedrun game, and second of all, I'm not that fast with a mouse. So I quickly abandoned that idea, remembered my TASing roots because I had been part of TAS videos since 2008, more on that part when we get to Super Mario Bros. 3. And I remembered, hey, there's this work going on to show tool-assisted speedruns being done on real hardware. At that time, there were a couple of devices that were functional that people had built to do what we call console verifications, or replay devices that could pretend to be a controller. And I can get into a lot of detail on how we're doing what we're doing, but as a brief statement, I knew that these existed, and I decided, hey, what would it look like if I went to Games Done Quick and showed tool-assisted speedruns? Because of some controversy, which I'll get into later when we're talking about Super Mario Bros. 3, there was some resistance to that. A lot of people were not thrilled with the idea of having something that wasn't pure human skill. And ultimately, the organizers of Games Done Quick said, yes, let's try it. And they accepted a couple of runs into AGDQ 2014. In the process of of setting up for that, I worked with True and other folks and in the TAS Videos community to make a replay device, a new one that was a little bit less, I would use the word janky, a little less unreliable than a breadboard, a just bunch of wires shoved in, connected to an Arduino. So we built a board specifically to use at the event, and it was pretty obvious we needed some way to hold all the cables and everything. And I believe Adelicat, who is the main site admin of TAS Videos, was one of a couple of people that suggested we get a mascot. And I don't know if it was Adelicat or someone else, but the idea of using a Rob came up. At that time, I was doing everything in Linux with a Raspberry Pi. So we had a Raspberry Pi and a replay device. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got a Rob robot now. Let's call him Robberry Pi. And everyone thought that was a terrible name. So Mecha Richter pops up in the forums and said, I'm loving me this TASBot action. And the name TASBot stuck.
It kind of stuck.
It stuck. It's. I didn't intend for him to be this way. He's now any combination of a replay device and some Legos, a visualization board, which is a controller. We've replaced the buttons with LEDs so you can see what buttons are being pressed. We've gone through several iterations. We went through an iteration with Micro 500 with the TASLink board. That's who made this visualization board. The most recent replay device that you're seeing here, that with this nice 3D printed case, is called the TAS TM32 replay device. It is with a 3D printed case. It was made by Onosaurus with code on the software side written by the MAS 3212. This particular device is really nice. Oh, we're already here. I've been using this device at the last 3 or 4 events now, and we're still using the visualization boards made by Micro 500, who's stepped away from the community, but has done really good work, and we continue to use that. But we do have one minor problem. TASBot is still a Rob, and we're not sure how much longer Nintendo is going to let us get away with that.
That would have been my questions otherwise. So I say, what is the time?
Time is when he... I think time is when he goes through the door on this game, right? Here is time.
Okay.
So that was 1833.
Real time, so to speak, but the actual time,
1829, yeah.
1829,
I think
26.
it probably was when he went through the door.
Yeah, we said we're going to have the counter here run just to have a visual representation. Okay. That would have been my question exactly. If did someone hear from Nintendo back? Because if people are not familiar with Rob...
Everyone I talk to at Nintendo, when they do show up at Games Done Quick type events, they tend to be very interested in saying, hey, don't worry, everyone inside of the company really likes what you do. We love what you remix.
But nobody can say, hey, do it.
But there are some aspects of other parts of the company, their legal team in particular, that are not necessarily as keen on it. Now, everything we're doing here, at least in the United States, where I'm based, is legal. And we'll get more into that in a second. But I want to do another Super Mario Bros. 2 run. Because I said that you could do things that are not possible for a human to do, and I want to demonstrate that.
Yeah, this was already some very particular stuff, but now...
This particular run we're about to see has not been seen at any event. This specific payload has never been shown at a Games Done Quick.
Can also let the time run, yeah? Okay.
You can, but it won't matter. You'll see why in a second.
Yeah, let me... just to be on the safe side.
Sure.
So... Let's see what
Sorry about your timer there. Don't worry, it's pretty irrelevant. So we're moving these enemies around for a reason. Actually, we're moving all of these items around for a very specific reason. And that is because we want to do this.
Okay, that's the final screen now.
Little glitched. Don't worry, the graphics clear up as soon as it gets to the next screen. That is the whole thing, I believe.
Okay, then it's 20 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So,
so I had seen similar things, not exactly this one here, but of course there's a lot of crazy stuff you can do with the speed of the inputs you can give in there. I think there was a time at one GDQ where there was the Super Mario World being reprogrammed to have the Twitch chat or something like this. So, or maybe I don't recall it quite exactly how it was, but you can do very specific, almost reprogramming stuff with the speed of the inputs there. Yeah.
That's right. So I'm seeing if, by the way, I can show you another payload.
Yeah.
We will hold that back for just a second. So, yes. I'm actually going to pause here for Super Mario Bros. 2. I think I'd like to move over to Super Mario Bros. 3.
Sure. Which one of the two that you have here? Because we have 2-1.
Yes. I brought 2 copies.
Two copies.
One of the things that's interesting is that I have specific requirements. There are different versions of some games, and in this case, there's PRG 0 and PRG 1. And I think that I have the right hands here. The only markings are very, very tiny. Next to where it says Rev A, there's a tiny imprint.
Yeah, I don't think you can see it on camera, but yeah, it is a tiny imprint there. And it says revision A on both. Everything is the same except this little imprint here.
Yeah, it's just a tiny little mark. So these are different versions of the same game. I'm going to use this one, which has been drawn on by someone, unfortunately.
It's Zach's game.
It's Zach's game. I'm sorry, Zach. You wrote on your cartridge, and we know all about it now. Unfortunately, this is not my original cartridge. I had one that was specific to me, and get to this. Okay, I had one that was my own cartridge. I'm just going to turn the console on so they get an image here on screen. I regret to say that it was pilfered during AGDQ 2015. So,
oh man!
And it was very special to me for a very specific reason, which I'll explain as we go through this. All right, I'm going to start Super Mario Bros. 3. If they're ready, we're going to do it in 3, 2, 1, go.
All right.
So this particular game is really important. In 2003, before YouTube existed, in the primordial ooze of the internet, someone named Morimoto released a video that said Super Mario Bros. With an extra S 3 Time Attack.
I think I've seen it.
Yes.
I think that's one of the first speedrun videos I've seen.
Correct. And the problem with this video is it was not released with any context of what it was. A lot of people who were watching the very poor quality Windows Media Windows Media video file, WMV, didn't know that it was made in the Fantasia emulator. And as a result, this run that did the most ridiculous things ever was distributed around the internet without people really having a firm understanding of what they were seeing. Certainly, the concept of tool-assisted speedruns at that time was virtually unknown. That, by the way, is a massive time-saving strategy there. This is a warps run of the game. There's not going to be any trickery or weird things here. This is the same general route that is used by...
if you're playing it normally, get the 2 warp flutes and then get to World 8 and then you play it normally there.
But there's a couple of things that are useful for us. You see that Hammer brother there. He is random. Or at least kind of
how he's moving on the world map. Either you meet him or you don't meet him. Yeah?
Yes. But because of something that I'll explain later with the pseudo-random number generator, we can force him to do exactly what we want. So right here, he will only move 1 space, because we made him move only 1 space by our actions. I'll get into more of that in a second. The particular run that Morimoto did back in 2003 led to some substantial controversy, because it was in reality made with a tool-assisted speedrun-capable emulator named Fantasia that had very primitive tools. Rather than the frame advance I talked about earlier, it simply had the ability to play the game in slow motion. But it was still very much using tools, even if they were somewhat primitive. And a lot of people in the real-time community were extremely upset, because this run... Oh, that's an interesting
That's fantastic.
Yes, flipping your tail at the same time that you get a 1-up causes that glitch sound. A lot of people in the real-time community saw it as simply fraudulent, as just something that was an aberration that never should have been made. Others, however, saw art in what was done. And one of those people was Bizquit. He created the website NESvideos.com. Well, not originally .com. It was actually at a different address, but he made a website to catalog tool-assisted speedruns and did one very specific thing that helped a lot. He specifically made sure that every single video that was encoded had a disclaimer saying, this is a tool-assisted speedrun. And really, the reason there was controversy is because it was akin to the doped Olympics. If you had someone show up at the Olympics who was doping, who was using enhancements, and they didn't tell anyone they did it, that wouldn't be very fair. And that's why the real-time community was so upset about this new thing that had happened from Morimoto. It looked so dirty to them. And the reality is, if you're going to compete in the doped Olympics, you need to tell people that you've been doping. In this case,
otherwise everybody has to be doped.
Yeah,
then it's equal again.
That would make for a very interesting show, but let's not do it. There's a lot of moral quandaries there.
Good kind of show.
So TAS Videos became the ultimate website at the end of the day. NES Videos became TAS Videos, hosting tool-assisted speedruns for a variety of different consoles. And today, you can go to TAS Videos and find everything from Wii games, Linux games that are Steam games that have been ported to Linux, more on that later, games for unusual handhelds, all kinds of things. And some of them, we can even show, are being done on emulators that are so accurate that we can get the same result on a real console. One thing that a lot of people say we do is cheating is our luck, where we manipulated, say, the hands in Super Mario Bros. 3.
Yeah, or how random encounters occur in Dragon Quest or something.
Things like that. And the hands in particular are a good example because if you statistically take your odds of how likely you are to get through all 3 hands in Super Mario Bros. 3, the odds are not good. It's something like 1.2% of all runs will have 0 hands.
Yeah, you're speaking about when I think it's after this level, there's a part you cross a bridge, and there you have the possibility there are the hands coming out and grab you and let you play an enemy a level or something. And as you said, it's a very low possibility to get over this bridge and not getting an enemy. If you would be doing a real run, so to speak, that would be the run killer. Otherwise, because you would getting such a huge time, it's
so here
it is. And now we had luck.
Exactly. Now, how did we get that luck? Well, the answer is we completely control everything from the purposes of seeding the random number generator. So let me explain it this way. These consoles had no real-time clock. They had no way of retaining state from one game to the other with any kind of consistency, although you could put a battery inside of a cartridge and be able to save game data that way. But most of the time you had no real-time clock. So there wasn't any easy way to use time as a seed from a random number generator. In other words, the only source of entropy, the only source of randomness was the player themselves. Some things you want to have random in the game, like whether or not the hand appears. To get a random number out of nothing, out of no randomness, what they do is take what button presses you have pressed, the number of frames that have elapsed since the beginning of the game, other characteristics, and they shove it into an algorithm that takes that, twists it around, and you get a random number out of the
So that it feels random, but it really isn't.
Right. Yeah? And a lot of things are very primitive. On the Nintendo especially, the original Nintendo, a lot of things are done in values of 256, where you could have a single byte in memory that could be one value out of 256. And maybe you say, if it's these lower values, then this result happens, and if these higher values, then this result happens, and so on and so forth. So maybe you might code it and say, hey, pseudo-random number generator, give me a random number. Okay, I put this in memory. Now I compare this. Does this value have these characteristics? Is it low enough, for instance? And if it is, then that random thing will happen. This really depends on what you're trying to do in the game, but it's just a way of introducing randomness from a console that doesn't have any built-in way to do random things. A couple of other newer consoles used very unique methods like sampling microphones, which is kind of creepy if you think about it. But in this case, because we fully control all possible methods of randomness, we are making this console deterministic. That, by the way, is a newly discovered method of getting through this level. You get through this fight slower, but you made it under those spikes faster.
So it equals out and you're a little bit faster in the end, yeah?
Yes, and you also don't have to be, you don't have to duck down and wait for the conveyor belt. So that's one of the most recent improvements. So this is the same exact route as the run that happened in 2003. It's just been iteratively improved over time. And this particular run was made by... let me pull this up. This was a recently submitted run. In fact, it might even still be on the workbench waiting for publication. See? Oh yeah, this one's not even out yet. So this particular run that I'm showing you is very fresh.
It's a premiere. Yeah.
Yes. It is... Get down here. Oops. SMB3. Here we go. This was made by... Oh, nope, that's the game end glitch. Where did Mario 3 go? I guess it is not already. It has in fact already been published, which is fine. Mario. Okay. Now, one of the things that can be kind of interesting about TAS videos is there are new submissions all the time. It's actually a very active community. Let me pull up the right one. I believe several people collaborated on this one. While I'm searching for that, we're very near the end of this run already, which is...
Yeah, what was interesting, you already talked about the controversy that was back then. Since we started doing this show here in Germany, of course, speedruns are getting bigger and bigger. And we have also this discussion. It won't stop ever. So what is it about the people who are doing speedruns manually? What about the tool-assisted runs? But I always see it like this, and I think it's kind of two sides of a medal, so to speak. I find it especially fascinating watching such tool-assisted speedruns because they're showing me what is really capable with in the confines of the game, even if you not have the human factor. So we are finished already.
We're coming up on time. This one was done by Maru. The previous one was done by Genisto and others. There's a whole long list of people that have done runs in this category. And time. Yeah, that was it. That was the whole thing. The actual time on this from a console perspective is 10 minutes, 23 seconds.
It's also interesting that this particular run is being used as a base for a lot of people because back then it worked. So I also believed in the beginning that it is a real run, so to speak, because it was very show-offy. We've seen the auto-scroller parts here and all the jumping around and getting the lives and everything. So it shows, look what I can do, so something. But of course, it doesn't have to be necessarily like this.
Yeah? Exactly. So we're going to do one more thing before we leave Mario for this particular... Unless there's something else you want to cover for Mario, but I have a funny feeling you're going to like this. This was something we showed recently at... and hopefully this actually works, by the way.
Okay, let's see if it works.
We'll find out. So we're going to run Super Mario Bros. 2 again, and... here is the run we are going to do. See what happens. So this also doesn't need a whole lot of timing. It's the same exact sequence that you saw earlier. But we're going to take this in a slightly different direction.
Okay, so again with picking up random stuff?
Yes.
Seemingly random stuff?
Seemingly random stuff. What we did earlier was an arbitrary code execution, an ACE. Arbitrary code execution means that you are able to take over the entire game console, which we are sort of known for doing at TAS with TAS blocks at GDQ runs. Before we jump to the end credits, but this time we're going to do something slightly different.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing. Let's get to the right directory. It's going to be... Okay, and see if this works. There it is. So we are currently connected to Discord.
So you just, so to speak, programmed through the controller port a version of Discord, and the NES is getting the internet, and you can have a Discord discussion.
Yes. Now this is, at this time, because it's kind of difficult to connect to a console, it's kind of a one-way client.
Yeah,
However, we're working on an adapter, a method of having the console send data back to TASBot. So effectively, what we just did is similar to something that has been seen before. We just connected a Nintendo to the internet through the controller ports, and we made a Discord client that runs on an original Nintendo. It's very limited. We're using only characters that were inside of Super Mario Bros. 2 itself. So there's only a few different... Oh, hey, it's the Moss. Oh, hey, there he is.
And now you're actually chatting with other people in the correct Discord channel, and we're seeing this on the screen now. That's nothing pre-prepared here, yeah? For the people outside watching.
Yes. So the funny thing is that the Moss3212, who's here chatting, was the one who put together the Python scripting and other work to connect to Discord. So he wrote the software side to get the data in. VI Greytech, who is also here somewhere, made the actual code that runs on this console. Now, it was rushed. We finished it while I was on stage at European Speedrunning Assembly, already running runs. We had some things that weren't quite right. As you can see, there is a graphical bug. When you get to the bottom of the screen, it moves the line that you were at up, which isn't expected. He's already fixed that, and he's working on much more interesting stuff from here.
So it worked out in the end, so you could show it on ESA?
We did, yes. We showed it during ESA, and that particular segment, just to take a brief pause, and you might ask, why are you doing all this? That particular segment raised $3,000 for Alzheimer's research in an hour.
Great.
Which was amazing. The most recent Games Done Quick, Summer Games Done Quick 2019 in Minneapolis, was by far the biggest event that we've ever had from a money raised perspective.
Was it over 3 million this time?
The marathon as a whole raised $3 million for the week, which was absolutely incredible. That was money raised for Doctors Without Borders. I can't pronounce it in French correctly. I could try. That's like Médecins Sans Frontières, but I can't.
That's about it, yeah.
It's something like that. I am very bad with other languages that are not English, but the long and the short of it is that we were given an hour roughly of that marathon, hour and a half, and they put a game called Celeste, a modern speedrunning game, as an incentive. Yeah. And the incentive they had was $175,000 to see that task, and it was met handily. That, combined with other things we've done in the last 6 months alone, means that in the last 6 months we've helped raise over $280,000 for charity. It's been absolutely an incredible year.
It's always it's incredible how generous, especially speedrunning fans are. Not only the people, and of course the people who contribute for help to raise so much money for good causes. And of course it shows that especially people are interested in TAS speedruns. And if you say something like Celeste, which is a very impressive game to run by yourself, and I almost broke my thumbs playing it because it's pretty difficult, I have to say. But this is stuff where I also say, if I can do something good and donate money and get to see something exciting like this, why not?
Exactly. And one thing that's worth saying is most of these types of events, RPG Limit Break, raising money for National Alliance on Mental Illness, and ESA, GDQ, Calathon, all of these other types of events, MagFest, they all have a common trait. 100% of the money goes directly to the charity. We pay for our own way to get to those events. So we don't take the money ourselves. There's nothing disingenuous going on here. And that has really felt good because I feel like I've been able to make a meaningful contribution to society through the work I've been doing as the leader of TASBot, of the entire community.
It's exciting what you can do with the love of video games.
Exactly.
And do so much good.
In this particular case, TASBot as a mascot has led to a huge community that's formed around it. We have 1,800 people on our Discord server. Is it okay if I plug it?
Of course.
People who are on screen right now are, in fact, at discord.tas.bot. If you want to join our community, by all means, feel free. There are other folks from Germany here. And some of them are, in fact, typing right here. There's so much more I could say, but I will close it off here. This is why I do this stuff, because there's an amazing community that helps create content, that works with me to make these events possible, does all of the different skill sets, everything from physical board design to working on the actual tool-assisted speedruns, the software in the background. It's just incredible stuff, and I'm so thankful for my entire community that helps out.
We're also very thankful that you took the time, especially out of doing so much good in the world and being around Europe here, to showcase a little bit at our humble abode over here. And we're going to see a little bit more of you at a later point, because we have some more stuff here, maybe show it later on. But for now, I want to say thank you. And it has been a pleasure. And we showed you have, of course, your own Twitch channel, but this is, of course, more representative of all the TAS people. They can visit you at twitch.tv/dwangoAC.
That's correct.
Yeah. You have streaming times there, or is it, if there's something you're restreaming?
I wish it was more consistent. I have a rather complicated life, because this is just what I do on the side. I have a day job to pay the bills. So I stream when I can, but most of what I'm streaming is the preparation for the types of events we want to do. I run one of the most complex Twitch streams anywhere from my home. And I highly recommend, if you're interested in what you've seen today, by all means, come in, stop by. There's always something fun happening when I am streaming. Most of the content highlights and then end up eventually on YouTube, on my YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, otherwise just come over, give at least a follow, and then enjoy the stuff. So thanks again. We're going to see a little bit from you. And thank you for watching. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. Wir sind beim nächsten Mal wieder mit noch ein bisschen mehr TASBot-Sachen. Und ja, ich hoffe, ihr hattet Spaß. Wenn ihr noch mehr habt, gerne unten in die Comments reinschreiben. Vergesst nicht, Kontakt ist unter speedrundale@rocketbeans.tv. Wenn ihr euch selber mal bewerben wollt oder eigene vielleicht Runs habt oder was anderes modifiziert habt, ne, wenn ihr entsprechend solche Runs vorbereitet habt. Und ja, dann bedanken wir uns und wir sagen Tschüss. Can you say Tschüss? This is goodbye.
Cheers.
Tschüss.